The day my old work crush became my new boss, she stood in front of 27 people and asked why I had never answered her question from 7 years ago. Not in those exact words. That would have been merciful. Instead, she looked across the conference room at me, smiled like she hadn't once ruined my ability to think in complete sentences, and said, Daniel Mercer, still allergic to direct communication? Half the room laughed. I did not. I was too busy realizing my Monday had just become a trapdoor. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 33, and I work as a senior operations analyst for a regional grocery chain based in Columbus, Ohio. Which sounds dull until you understand that every late truck, spoiled shipment, wrong invoice, and missing pallet somehow ends up on my desk with the emotional weight of a hostage negotiation. I like order. I like numbers. I like problems with answers. Women like Rachel Voss were never supposed to come back into my life wearing a charcoal blazer, carrying a leather notebook, and being introduced as our new director of supply operations. Rachel was 34 now, still had that calm, devastating way of entering a room like she'd already read the ending and decided not to spoil it for anyone. Her dark hair was shorter than I remembered, brushing her jaw instead of falling down her back. She wore small gold hoops. No wedding ring. Not that I checked. I absolutely checked. 7 years earlier, Rachel and I had worked side by side at a logistics startup that survived on caffeine, panic, and venture capital it did not deserve. She was the inventory coordinator with color-coded spreadsheets and a laugh that could turn a brutal 12-hour shift into something almost worth living through. I was the guy who fixed routing errors, rewired broken dashboards, and once spent 40 minutes in a storage closet with her during a tornado warning, pretending I wasn't noticing the vanilla scent of her shampoo. We were almost something, everyone knew it, which was part of the problem. Back then, Rachel teased me for being too careful. I teased her for treating every office printer like a personal enemy. We ate dinner from vending machines after late shifts. She stole my hoodies when the warehouse office got cold. I learned how she took her coffee, 2 creams, 1 sugar, unless she was furious, then black, like a warning. And one Friday night after we'd saved a doomed client account, she'd stop beside my car under a busted parking lot light and said, Daniel, are you ever going to ask me what you actually want to ask me? I had opened my mouth. Then my phone buzzed. An email from HR mandatory meeting, Monday morning. Topic: workplace conduct boundaries. I never asked her. By Tuesday, everything between us had changed. HR told me there had been concerns about personal attention, making a colleague uncomfortable. No names, no details. Just enough corporate fog to make a decent man feel guilty for breathing wrong. They told me not to initiate any personal conversation that could be interpreted as romantic. So I did what careful men do when they're terrified of becoming the villain in someone else's story. I backed away. Rachel left 6 weeks later. No goodbye lunch, no final vending machine dinner, just an empty desk and her old blue mug sitting beside the sink like evidence. Now she was standing at the head of our conference room, my new boss, while my coworkers looked between us with the hungry curiosity of people who had just smelled smoke. Daniel and I worked together years ago, Rachel said smoothly. He was annoyingly good at his job then, too. Annoyingly? I managed. Her eyes flicked to mine. You once reorganized an entire routing system while eating cold noodles with a plastic fork. It was a productive lunch. You labeled the fork. It was my fork. That got another laugh, warmer this time. Rachel's mouth curved, and for one dangerous second, I was 26 again, standing under that broken parking lot light with my heart in my throat. Then she turned back to the room and started talking strategy. She was good. No, that wasn't fair. She was better than good. Rachel didn't come in trying to prove she was the smartest person there. She asked sharp questions, remembered names after hearing them once, noticed that our frozen foods team was drowning and that finance had been blaming them for delays caused 3 steps earlier. Within 40 minutes, she had made our entire department look less like a mess and more like a machine that only needed someone brave enough to tighten the right bolts. At one point, she challenged one of my reports on a forecast error, then immediately backed him up when he explained the supplier had changed shipment windows without notice. Competent women had always been my weakness. Rachel being competent with authority? That was just unfair. When the meeting ended, people gathered their laptops and coffee cups, still buzzing. I waited deliberately because I was not going to be the man who ran out of a room to avoid a woman he had spent 7 years trying not to think about. Rachel capped her pen without looking up. You can breathe now, Daniel. I was breathing. You were doing that thing where you look calm but your left hand starts negotiating with your watch. I glanced down. My fingers were on the clasp. Traitorous little things. She walked to the glass wall and lowered the blinds, not all the way, just enough to soften the fishbowl feeling. That joke earlier, she said, I shouldn't have put you on the spot. It was fine. No, it was familiar. There's a difference. That landed harder than I expected. I leaned against the conference table, keeping a responsible amount of distance between us. Congratulations on the promotion. Thank you. You earned it. Her expression shifted. Not softened exactly, more like something guarded had heard a knock. You always did say that like you meant it, she said. I did mean it. The room went quiet in a way meetings never do. Outside the glass, keyboards clacked. Someone laughed near the printer. Ordinary office noise, completely unaware that my past had just stepped within 6 feet of me and was watching me like I owed her an answer. Rachel folded her arms. Can I ask you something? As my boss or as someone who once insulted my fork system? A small smile. Both. That feels legally complicated. Then answer as Daniel. I should have made another joke. I should have said we had a budget review or an inbox full of emergencies, or that adults with org charts above them should not stand in conference rooms digging up old parking lots. Instead, I nodded. Rachel looked straight at me. Did I do something wrong back then? The question took all the cleverness out of me. What? When I asked if you were ever going to ask me what you wanted to ask me. Her voice stayed steady, but her fingers tightened around the edge of her notebook. After that, you disappeared from me without leaving the building. I stared at her. For 7 years, I had believed I was respecting a boundary. For 7 years, she had believed she was the mistake. Rachel, I said carefully. HR called me in. Her face changed, not dramatically. Rachel wasn't dramatic, but the color left her cheeks in a slow, visible way. What do you mean HR called you in? They said there were concerns, that I needed to avoid personal conversations with a colleague. She didn't blink. Then she looked toward the closed door like the past might be standing on the other side with a badge and a clipboard. I never complained about you, she said. The sentence was quiet. It still hit like a dropped box in an empty warehouse. I pushed off the table. I didn't know that. I thought you changed your mind. I thought you wanted distance. Her laugh was small and humorless. So we let a nameless HR warning ruin 7 years. I wanted to say something mature, something careful, something that belonged in an office with glass walls and reporting structures. But Rachel stepped closer, close enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume, clean and warm, and nothing like memory because memory doesn't stand in front of you with tired eyes and a title that makes wanting her dangerous. Before either of us could speak, her phone lit up on the table. A calendar alert filled the screen. 3 p.m. HR onboarding, fraternization policy review. We both looked at it. Then Rachel looked back at me, and this time her smile wasn't polished at all. It was almost reckless. Well, she said, that timing is rude. Rachel and I stared at her phone like it had insulted both our mothers. Fraternization policy review, I read aloud, because apparently my survival instinct had resigned. Yes, she said, my favorite office romance genre. You have a favorite? I used to. The words came out too fast. Her eyes flicked away. That should have been the moment I stepped back and rebuilt the wall. Boss, employee, policy, payroll, all the sturdy little nouns that keep adults from setting fire to their lives. Instead, I said, Rachel. She looked at me. I would have asked. Her face went still. 7 years collapsed into one sentence. The parking lot. The buzzing phone. Her blue mug by the sink. Every almost. I need to go to HR, she said. Right. But we're not done with this conversation. My pulse did something unprofessional. No, I said. We're not. She picked up her notebook, straightened her blazer, and became Director Voss again, so completely it almost hurt to watch. At the door, she paused. Daniel. Yeah? For what it's worth, I wanted you to ask. Then she walked out. I remained in the conference room for a full minute, pretending to review a blank section of wall. By 4 o'clock, the entire department knew Rachel and I had history. Not because either of us said anything, but because offices are ecosystems built on toner, bad coffee, and suspicion. Also because Mark Lynn from procurement had apparently seen Rachel lower the blinds and immediately texted, "She's either firing Mercer or marrying him," to the wrong group chat. By 4:15, my analyst Nadia Ruiz rolled her chair to my desk and whispered, "So, funeral or wedding?" Budget meeting. With blinds? It was sunny. It's February. Climate change. She narrowed her eyes. Nadia was 29, brilliant, and had the moral restraint of a raccoon in an unlocked bakery. You know I can sense withheld information. It's one of my workplace accommodations. I don't think that's how accommodations work. I'll ask HR. The word HR made my jaw tighten. Nadia noticed. Her expression shifted from gossip-hungry to genuinely concerned. You okay? Ask me tomorrow. That bad? That weird. Before she could interrogate me further, an email hit my inbox. From Rachel Voss. Subject: Supplier Variance Dashboard. Daniel, can you send the current build and your notes before EOD? Also, if you have time tomorrow morning, I'd like to review the Yorkfield bottleneck with you. Thanks, Rachel Professional. Normal. Exactly the kind of email a director sends a senior analyst. Except at the bottom, beneath her signature, there was one extra line. PSI still don't trust shared office forks. I read it 3 times like an idiot. Then I replied, Fork security remains an underappreciated pillar of operational excellence. I hit send and immediately regretted being alive. At 5:30, while most people were shutting down, I saw Rachel leave HR's office. She looked calm. Too calm. The kind of calm people wear after being politely threatened by someone with laminated forms. She glanced toward my desk but didn't stop. Just gave the smallest nod and kept walking to her office. 5 minutes later, another email arrived. From Rachel Voss. Subject: Tomorrow 8 a.m. My office. Door open. Strictly work. R. I stared at door open longer than necessary, then typed 8 works. I almost added strictly forks, but decided one near-death reply per day was enough. That night, I slept terribly. My brain kept replaying her question. Did I do something wrong back then? The worst part was that I had been proud of myself for backing away. I thought I was being decent. I thought restraint was kindness. But what if it had just been cowardice wearing a suit? The next morning, I got to the office at 7:32 with coffee, 2 printed reports, and the emotional stability of wet cardboard. Rachel's door was open. She was already there, hair tucked behind one ear, reading through onboarding materials with a highlighter in her hand. A white paper cup sat beside her laptop. Black coffee. Warning. I knocked on the frame. Bad morning? She looked up. You remember? I remember most supply chain indicators. Her mouth twitched. Come in. I sat in the chair across from her desk. Door open. Distance appropriate. Reports visible. If HR had hidden cameras, we looked painfully boring. Rachel tapped the folder in front of her. So, officially, the fraternization policy says supervisors can't have romantic or sexual relationships with direct or indirect reports. Shocking twist. And employees are required to disclose conflicts of interest. Also shocking. And HR recommends avoiding any behavior that could create the perception of favoritism, coercion, or retaliation. That one seems fair. It is fair. She leaned back. Which is why I requested that you be moved out of my reporting line. My brain stalled. You what? Temporarily pending review. I told them we had a prior personal friendship, that there was potential for perceived conflict, and that your work is too important to put under a cloud. I should have felt relieved. Instead, all I could hear was HR 7 years earlier using foggy language to push me out of her life. You don't have to do that, I said. Yes, I do. Rachel, Daniel, I'm not letting HR make choices for us by pretending they're protecting everyone. For us, the words sat between us, alive and dangerous. She looked down at the file. They didn't love the request. I'm sure they didn't. Marjorie Bell asked if there was anything she needed to know. Our HR director. Of course. What did you say? I said not yet. My hands went still on the reports. Rachel's gaze met mine. Then she asked whether you and I had ever been involved. And? I said no. A pause. Because technically we were only emotionally inefficient. Despite everything, I laughed. She did too, softly, and for a moment the years loosened. Then she opened another folder. There's something else. I didn't like her tone. What? I filed the written disclosure this morning through the HR portal. Prior personal friendship. Potential perceived conflict. Request to move you off my reporting line. She turned her laptop toward me. A submission receipt sat on the screen, time-stamped 7:41 a.m. with a reference number at the bottom. I emailed myself a copy. Habit. That's a very Rachel habit. It's a very burned once habit. She closed the laptop halfway. Now answer something for me. Back then, did anyone ever give you anything in writing? I thought about that meeting. The vague phrases, the careful non-accusations, the way they never handed me a single document to sign, only told me they were making a note. No, I said. When I left that company, I asked for a copy of my personnel file. Standard exit stuff. There was nothing in it, no warning, no complaint, not one line about conduct. Rachel went very still. Then whatever happened to you happened in a room, she said quietly, and nowhere else. She lowered her voice further. Who was in the room with you? I swallowed. Dale Hargrove, HR manager, and my supervisor at the time, Kent Rowe. Rachel's expression hardened. Kent? You remember him? I remember he asked me out twice after you stopped talking to me. My stomach dropped. She nodded once, grimly. And when I turned him down, he told me I was making things awkward for the team. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Rachel's desk phone rang, loud enough to make us both flinch. She answered, eyes still on mine. Rachel Voss. A pause. Her face changed. Yes, Marjorie, I understand. Another pause. No, Daniel is here for the Yorkfield review. Her fingers tightened around the receiver. Then she said, very calmly, if there's a concern, put it in writing. She hung up. I waited. Rachel exhaled through her nose. HR would like me to remember that transitions are delicate. That sounds like a threat written by a candle company. It gets better. Her smile was sharp now. They also advised me not to discuss historical personnel matters with you. I looked toward the open door, then back at her. 7 years of silence suddenly had fingerprints. Rachel picked up her pen. Now, she said, voice crisp and furious, let's review the Yorkfield bottleneck. I blinked. Seriously? Yes, because we're excellent at our jobs. She clicked the pen once. And after work, Daniel, you and I are getting coffee somewhere HR can't overhear us. By noon, I had solved the Yorkfield bottleneck and developed a new one directly behind my sternum. Rachel and I worked like we had never stopped. That was the problem. She challenged assumptions before I finished explaining them. I pulled archived delivery data before she asked. She spotted a vendor pattern I'd missed. I built the model while she paced beside the whiteboard, sleeves pushed up, gold hoop catching the light every time she turned her head. It was efficient. It was infuriating. It was the closest thing to flirting two supply chain people could manage without violating 3 policies and a moral code. At 1:17, Nadia passed the opening. Dower looked at the whiteboard, looked at us, and mouthed, "Oh, no." Rachel caught it. Something wrong, Nadia? No, great, very professional, extremely beige energy in here. Nadia fled. She's going to be unbearable, I said. She seems smart. She is. That makes it worse. At 5:42, Rachel appeared beside my desk with her coat over one arm. Ready? The question was simple. The office was not. Heads turned with the subtlety of meerkats. I shut down my laptop. For coffee? For coffee, she repeated dryly. Marklin's head emerged over his monitor. Is this coffee operational or recreational? Rachel smiled at him with director-level menace. It's classified. Mark sank back down. We went to a place 6 blocks away called the Copper Kettle. All mismatched chairs and overconfident plants. Rachel chose a corner table away from the windows, not hidden. Private. There was a difference, though my nervous system did not appreciate the nuance. For a minute, we only added sugar and took the lids off our cups. It felt absurdly intimate after 7 years of nothing. Finally, Rachel said, Kent Rowe works at North Point now. I looked up. Our competitor? Vice President of Distribution Strategy, it's on their website. Of course it is. Dale Hargrove retired 3 years ago, also public. People announce retirement like a birth. You spent your afternoon investigating? I spent my afternoon being told not to investigate. It inspired me. I smiled despite myself. Then she pulled a folded sheet of paper from her bag. I also called someone. Lena Ortiz. The name hit me like old dust from a file cabinet. Lena had been our payroll coordinator at the startup. Quiet, observant, always knowing exactly where every body was buried. She remembered? She remembered too much. My coffee suddenly looked undrinkable. Rachel read from her notes. Kent complained several times that you and I were distracting and that I was unprofessional around you. I let out a humorless laugh. You were the most professional person there. I once threatened to throw a printer off a loading dock. It deserved it. Her mouth softened, but only for a second. She also said Kent asked Dale to rein in the situation before it became a problem. No complaint, no witness statement. Just pressure. Pressure. That was what corporate cowards called sabotage when it wore a tie. So Kent wanted me out of the way. Maybe. Rachel. She looked down. What else did Lena say? A muscle moved in her jaw. That Kent told people you were making me uncomfortable. I went cold. And he told me, she said quietly, that you had concerns about my professionalism, that you thought I was getting attached. The espresso machine hissed. Someone laughed near the counter. A spoon clinked against ceramic. 7 years of absence rearranged itself, not misunderstanding, not caution. Something someone chose. Then Rachel set the paper down and pressed her palm flat over it, like she was keeping it from floating away. I need to be honest about what this is, she said. It's one woman's memory, 7 years old. That company dissolved. The servers went with it. There's no file to request and nobody to subpoena, and I wouldn't want to anyway. So we can't prove any of it. No, she met my eyes. But I believe her. And I believe you. That last part undid me more than the rest. I should have talked to you, I said. I should have cornered you in the break room and demanded answers. You would have. I almost did. She smiled faintly. Then you started treating me like a live electrical wire. You were. Her eyes lifted. I cleared my throat. Not in a workplace liability sense. The smile became real, then faded into something more fragile. Daniel, I need to say this once while we're not in the office. She leaned forward. I liked you. A lot. Not as office gossip, not as vending machine dinner entertainment. I was waiting for you to make a move because I thought you were being respectful. I was. I know that now. I liked you too, I said. Enough that HR telling me I might have made you uncomfortable made me feel sick. Her expression cracked. Daniel. I thought leaving you alone was the only decent option. Decent, she said softly. Stupid, but decent. I laughed once. Fair. The silence that followed was crowded with everything we were not allowed to do yet. Rachel glanced at my left hand resting near my cup. So did I. Neither of us moved. We can't start something while you report to me, she said. I know. And if they approve the transfer, people will talk. They already talk. Mark thinks coffee has security clearance. She huffed a laugh. I'm serious. So am I. I don't want your career damaged because of me. My career survived worse than wanting coffee with Daniel Mercer. Wanting. There it was, bare on the table between the napkins and the sugar packets. Rachel. She met my eyes, and for once she didn't hide behind competence. I'm not asking you to break rules, she said. I'm asking whether there's anything here worth doing properly. Yes. I answered too fast. Her breath caught. I didn't apologize. Yes, I repeated. There is. Rachel looked away toward the dark window, smiling like she was trying not to. Then her phone buzzed. She checked it, and the smile vanished. What? I asked. She turned the screen toward me. From Marjorie Bell Rachel. Please see me first thing tomorrow. Do not include Daniel in further discussions of this matter. A concern has been raised about preferential treatment. I would also note for the record that I have no disclosure on file from you regarding any prior relationship with Mr. Mercer. I read it twice. You filed that this morning, I said. 7:41 a.m. Rachel's voice was very level. Through the portal, receipt and reference numbers sitting in my personal inbox. So either it never got processed, or someone decided it was more useful if it didn't exist. I'm not going to guess which yet. That's a written statement, though. It is. Her eyes were bright with something colder than anger. That's the part that matters, not who complained. People are allowed to raise concerns and HR is allowed to protect them. But nobody gets to write down that my disclosure doesn't exist when it does. I took out my phone. What are you doing? Emailing myself a timeline while it's fresh. Dates, times, who said what? Her lips parted. Daniel, if this becomes a fight, it became a fight 7 years ago. I just didn't know I was in it. She stared at me, then pulled a pen from her bag and slid a napkin toward me. Fine, she said. Start with the parking lot. I picked up the pen. Our hands brushed. Barely. Not enough to count as anything, enough to ruin me. Rachel didn't pull away immediately, neither did I. Then she whispered, HR can tell me what not to document. Her thumb grazed my knuckle once before she let go. But they can't stop me from remembering. By 9 o'clock the next morning, Rachel was in HR. By 9:07, Nadia was at my desk with 2 coffees and the expression of a woman arriving at a crime scene before the detectives. You look, she said, handing me one, like your spreadsheet learned betrayal. Good morning to you too. Director Voss just went into Marjorie's office. Door closed. Blinds closed. That's not a meeting, that's a summoning. I opened my inbox. I have work. You have cheekbones doing stress. Please never say that again. She sat anyway. I should have sent her away. Instead, I lowered my voice. When you submit something through the HR portal, does the system confirm it? Nadia stopped joking. Always. Receipt to your email, reference number, and it drops into whatever register it belongs to. Conflict disclosures go into the conflict of interest log. Who can see that log? HR compliance. And the person who filed it, in their own profile. She tilted her head. Why? Did something not show up? Hypothetically. Then hypothetically, that's not a small thing. She lowered her voice, too. Complaints can come in 100 ways. Somebody can walk into an office and say a sentence out loud, and that's legitimate, and HR doesn't have to tell you who. But a filed disclosure isn't a rumor. It's a record. Records don't wander off. My pulse changed. Are you sure? My cousin works compliance for a hospital. She lives for boring process traps. Across the room, Marjorie's office door opened. Rachel stepped out with her face arranged into something polished and unreadable. Marjorie followed behind her, speaking too closely, smiling too hard. Then both women looked at me. Nadia whispered, "Oh, that's a villain glance." Rachel didn't come to my desk. She went straight to her office. 30 seconds later, an email arrived. From Rachel Voss. Subject, Yorkfield Materials. Please send the revised files to Marjorie and copy me. Nothing else. No fork joke. No initial. My stomach sank. I attached the files, added a neutral note, and copied Rachel. Before sending, I looked at the recipient line. Then I added our internal compliance mailbox. Nadia saw. Bold. Accidental transparency? Hot. Nadia. Sorry, professional hot. At 11:12, Marjorie called me in. Her office smelled like lemon polish and institutional dread. She sat behind a spotless desk, hands folded, silver reading glasses on a chain. "Daniel," she said, "thank you for joining me." That was HR language for sit down and consider your life choices. I sat. She smiled. "I want to discuss workplace perception." "I'm happy to discuss anything documented." Her smile thinned by one molecule. "This is simply a conversation." "Then I'd like to take notes." "Is that necessary?" "For accuracy." A pause. "Of course." I opened my notebook. Marjorie leaned back. "As you know, Rachel is new in her leadership role. It's important that the team perceives her as objective and focused." "I agree. There have been concerns about your prior relationship." "What relationship?" Her eyes sharpened. "Your personal relationship. We were colleagues 7 years ago, friends. We were never involved." That distinction can be blurry. Not in policy language. For the first time, Marjorie looked annoyed. I kept my voice level. "I'm not going to ask who raised a concern. That's not my business. But you wrote to Rachel that no disclosure exists. She filed one Tuesday morning. Do you want the reference number?" "That is a records question." "It's your record." Her pen stopped moving. The air between us cooled. "Daniel," she said, "I would caution you against becoming defensive." "I'm not defensive. I'm being precise." Precision is not always helpful in sensitive matters. "That has not been my experience." Her mouth tightened. Then came the sentence. "Sometimes employees mistake mutual friendliness for something more." I stared at her. 7 years ago, I would have folded, apologized, retreated. Let vague authority turn my own memory against me. Not this time. "Who are we talking about now?" I asked. Marjorie blinked. "Excuse me? Rachel? Me? Someone from 7 years ago? Because if this is about historical personnel matters, you already instructed Rachel not to discuss them. I'd like to know why they're being implied here." Her face went very still. Before she could answer, a knock came at the door. Rachel entered without waiting. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "Compliance is asking why they were copied on the Yorkfield files." Marjorie's eyes flashed. "That was unnecessary." Rachel glanced at me. "Daniel was asked to send them to you. He copied the team responsible for documentation integrity. Seems appropriate." I wrote that down. Marjorie noticed. Rachel noticed Marjorie noticing. For one ridiculous second, I almost smiled. Then Rachel set a single printed page on the desk and turned it around. A portal receipt. Tuesday, 7:41 a.m. Reference number. Subject line. Conflict of interest disclosure. Voss/Mercer. "I'm not asking who raised the concern," Rachel said. "I'll never ask. But yesterday you put in writing that I had made no disclosure. I need that corrected, and I need to know where this went." Marjorie's face lost color. Small. Quick. Damning. "Records occasionally lag," she said. "Then it'll be in the log this morning." Rachel's voice stayed pleasant. "It isn't. I checked my own profile. There's no entry, no withdrawal, no note." Silence. Marjorie removed her glasses. "Rachel, I think you're misunderstanding the purpose of this discussion." "I don't think I am. You are new here. I'm not new to being managed by implication." The room went so quiet I could hear the HVAC click on. Rachel's hands rested at her sides, steady. 7 years ago, someone used vague language to separate me from a colleague, and nothing was ever written down. I can't prove that. I'm not trying to. But this week I did everything correctly in writing on your system and it vanished. That I can prove." Marjorie stood. "Careful." Rachel smiled faintly. "I am being careful. That's why I sent that receipt to compliance 20 minutes ago." My phone buzzed in my pocket, then Rachel's. Then Marjorie's desk phone lit up. Marjorie looked at the caller ID and went rigid. Rachel checked her screen, then turned it toward me. From compliance office subject, disclosure record. Voss. "We have received your submission receipt and the written statement indicating no disclosure was on file. These do not reconcile. Please preserve all related communications pending review." I looked at Marjorie. So did Rachel. Marjorie did not pick up the ringing phone. Finally, she said, This meeting is over. Rachel nodded. Agreed. We left together, silent until we reached the hallway. People pretended not to watch us and failed with enthusiasm. At Rachel's office door, she stopped. That was risky, she said. Copying compliance? Saying what you said. You walked into HR like a courtroom scene. I was calm. You were terrifying. Her eyes warmed. Good. Then her expression shifted, and I knew before she spoke that the fight had changed shape. I got the transfer decision. My chest tightened. And? Approved. Effective Monday, you report to finance operations. Different chain of command. Relief hit first, then something louder. Rachel looked toward the busy office, then back at me. That means we still wait. No secrecy, no mess, no giving them a weapon. Agreed. But Daniel? Yeah? Her voice dropped. HR can't stop me from saying it anymore. I forgot how to breathe. She stepped just inside her office, still in view, still appropriate, still careful enough that no one could accuse her of anything except honesty. I wanted you then, she said softly. I want you now. And when this is clean, I'd like you to finally ask me. I stood there with my heart trying to break out of company property. Then my inbox pinged. So did hers. Rachel opened the email first, her face hardened. What? I asked. She turned the screen. From Kent Rowe. Subject, saw the announcement. Rachel, congratulations. The trade newsletter went out this morning, so half the Midwest knows. Funny how old situations repeat themselves. Hope you handle the distractions better this time. Best, Kent Rachel read Kent's email twice. The first time, her face went still. The second, she laughed. One short, tired sound. That's it, I said. That's it. She set the phone down. He saw my name in an industry newsletter this morning. That's how he knows I'm here. He doesn't know one thing about this week. It reads like a confession. It reads like a man being unpleasant from a safe distance. She rubbed her eyes. If I walk into that review waving this, I'm a woman with a grudge and a screenshot. So we do nothing? We forward it, we label it accurately, and we let it be exactly as small as it is. Legal came back the next afternoon. A competitor's VP being snide from a corporate account was rude, not actionable. They filed it, and that was the whole outcome. The review that mattered was about this building. It took 3 weeks. I gave a written timeline. Rachel gave hers with timestamps and receipts. Lena Ortiz spoke on record about Kent, and compliance noted that the old company no longer existed and that her account could not be corroborated. Those 3 weeks were the longest clean pause of my life. We became two adults walking around a live wire, careful not because we were afraid, but because this time nobody was going to twist care into guilt. The findings were narrow. Rachel's disclosure had been received and never entered into the register. The statement saying it didn't exist was retracted. Handling moved to compliance permanently. Nothing was concluded about intent because intent is the one thing you can't pull out of a database. Marjorie left 6 weeks later to pursue new opportunities. Nobody was allowed to say why, and I stopped needing to know. Kent kept his job. Dale stayed retired. No reckoning, no scene where a smug man finally learned something. I made my peace with that in the break room on a Thursday holding bad coffee. They're never going to be sorry, I said. Rachel considered it. No, but we're the only two people whose version of those 7 years matters, and we finally have the same one. Nadia, unseen behind the vending machine, said, That's beautiful. Also, you're standing too close. We were not. On the Monday after the review closed, Rachel found me near the elevators at 5:08. No audience, no blinds, no fog. Just the two of us and the soft ding of floors changing. The transfer is permanent, she said. I heard. And compliance confirmed there's no conflict as long as we disclose if anything changes. If anything changes, I repeated. Her eyes held mine. 7 years ago, I had stood under a broken parking lot light and let fear answer for me. I wasn't 26 anymore. So I took one step closer, still leaving. Space, still giving her the choice. Rachel Voss, I said, would you like to have dinner with me this Friday? Not operational, not classified, definitely recreational. Her face softened in a way I'd never seen in any conference room. Yes, she said, I would. Then, after a pause, finally. We filed the new disclosure the following Monday, both of us from our own accounts with receipts. Our first date lasted 4 hours. Italian place, candles, terrible parking. Rachel ordered pasta with shrimp, then stole 3 bites of mine because supply chain is about resource sharing. I said that was not what supply chain meant. She said she was a director and I should respect her expertise. We talked about the 7 years we'd lost, but not like people digging through wreckage. More like people opening windows. She had moved twice. I had bought a house with a porch I never sat on. I had dated kind women and never understood why part of me was still waiting in a warehouse office beside a blue mug. After dinner, we walked along the river in the cold, shoulders bumping. When she reached for my hand, there was no policy strong enough to make me let go. 6 months later, Rachel still kept her office door open when I stopped by. Mostly because Nadia had declared herself romance compliance and took the role seriously. Work got cleaner, less haunted. Rachel was promoted again the following spring because competence becomes undeniable when nobody is standing behind it with a knife. On the anniversary of the day she came back, we drove past the old startup building. It's a self-storage place now, which felt spiritually accurate. The parking lot light was still broken. I parked under it. Rachel looked at me. Really? I'm a man who believes in closing loops. She laughed, but her eyes shone. We stood beside my car in the cold, older than we had been, braver than we had been, our breath clouding between us. I have something to ask you, I said. Her smile trembled. You already asked me to dinner. I'm improving with practice. I reached into my coat pocket. Not for a ring, not yet. For a blue ceramic mug I'd hunted online for weeks, the same shade as the one she left behind. I handed it over with both hands like an apology and a promise. Her fingers closed around it. For all the coffee we missed, I said. Rachel looked down at the mug, then up at me, and this time when she kissed me under that useless, broken light, there was no buzzing phone, no vague warning, no one else's fear speaking over us. Just her hand in my coat, my laugh against her mouth, and 7 years of silence ending in the glow of a light that had never worked, but somehow still brought us back to each other. So tell me something. Under that parking lot light, with an HR email lighting up my phone and Rachel standing there waiting for an answer, would you have backed away quietly the way I did? Or would you have asked her the question first and dealt with Monday on Monday? Have you ever gone silent on someone because a third party made you doubt what you were feeling and only learned the truth years later? I'd genuinely like to read your version in the comments. And if this one got to you, leave a like and subscribe, and I'll meet you at the next story. What would you have done if something like my old work crush became my new boss? HR can't stop me from saying it anymore happened to you? And have you ever mistaken kindness for something your heart was too afraid to name? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.